The worst pain I felt that night wasn't the fresh stitches pulling across my abdomen like jagged teeth. It wasn't the way every breath felt like a blade twisting under my ribs, or the lingering, sickening scent of hospital antiseptic that seemed to have replaced the very marrow in my bones. No. The worst pain was the sound of the front door clicking shut behind me. That small, metallic sound usually meant safety, but that night it felt like a trap snapping shut. I thought I had finally made it home to rest. I thought I was stepping into a sanctuary. I was wrong. I was stepping back into a cage, and the voice that met me didn't sound like family. It sounded like a punishment. I was pale. Ghostly, really. My discharge bracelet was still a bright, clinical plastic circle around my wrist, a mocking reminder of the fluorescent lights and morphine drips I'd just left behind. I was moving with the agonizing care of someone made of glass, one hand pressed firmly against the hallway wall just to keep the world from spinning. I hadn't even reached the living room before the air in the apartment curdled. "Nice of you to finally come home." Jake's voice slammed into me before I could even see him. He was sprawled on the couch, the flickering blue light of the TV dancing off his face like a predator in a cave. He didn't look up. He didn't ask how the surgery went. He didn't ask if I was okay. "Quit faking it and get dinner on the table this second. I'm starving." The words were so casual, so practiced in their cruelty, that for a split second my brain tried to rationalize them. Maybe he didn't see the way I was hunched over? Maybe he didn't notice I was literally trembling? But then he looked at me. He looked directly at my sweat-beaded forehead, at my hand clutching my side, and his expression didn't soften. He looked at me like I was a piece of equipment that had malfunctioned and was late for a shift. For 10 years, I had been trained to obey. I had been conditioned to lower my head, swallow the hot lump of hurt in my throat, and find a way to make the world comfortable for him. I almost did it. I almost took that first step toward the kitchen. But then, the silence behind me shifted. I wasn't alone. A man had walked in just behind me, carrying the small overnight bag I'd been too weak to hold. He had heard every cold, jagged word. I didn't turn around yet. I didn't need to. I could feel the temperature in the room drop. The air became heavy and dangerous, as if something powerful, something absolute, had just stepped into the room and was taking careful, lethal notes of everything Jake was saying. Jake still hadn't noticed him. He was too busy being the king of his own miserable hill. He didn't realize that the biggest mistake of his life wasn't ordering his post-op sister to cook. It was doing it in front of the one man who could dismantle his entire reality with a single phone call. As I stood there, trapped between the brother who broke me and the stranger who might save me, the past didn't come back as a memory. It came back as a physical weight. Some families have older brothers who protect you. I had Jake, who is 6 years older, and who treated being born first like it gave him a deed of ownership over my time, my body, and my silence. I remembered being 12, kneeling on the cold linoleum of this same kitchen, scrubbing grease off plates while Jake dropped more into the sink, laughing as he told me I was useless if dinner wasn't hot by 6. I remembered being 16, holding a report card with straight A's, my ticket out of this town, only for him to rip it out of my hand and sneer, "Girls like you don't leave places like this, Elena. You're a helper. You're a background character. Stop dreaming." I remembered being 19, working double shifts at the diner until my feet bled, hiding cash in an old coffee tin behind the flour. I was so close to having enough for my first semester of community college. Then one Tuesday, the tin was empty. Jake didn't even deny it. He just shrugged and said I must have misplaced it, then walked out to buy a new pair of designer sneakers. He didn't just steal my money, he stole my sense of reality. He turned abuse into a routine until I started to doubt my own mind. Even as I stood there that night, stitched back together by a surgeon, a part of me, that broken, 12-year-old part, still wanted to please him. I still hoped that if I just worked hard enough, he would finally see a sister instead of a servant, but surgery strips away illusions. Pain has a way of clarifying things. When your body has been cut open and sewn shut, you lose the energy to romanticize the people who keep trying to wound you. "Did you hear me?" Jake snapped, finally sitting up. "I'm hungry. Move it." The old Elena would have flinched. The old Elena would have apologized for being in pain. But that night, I did neither. I stood perfectly still. I let the silence stretch. I watched him get irritated, his jaw tightening, his ego bruised by my lack of immediate movement. "His name is Adrian Cole," I said, my voice sounding like a stranger's, calm, brittle, and terrifyingly clear. "He helped me get home from the hospital." Jake's face changed. Not fear, not yet, just confusion. He looked past me, finally seeing the tall, shadowed figure standing by the door. Adrian didn't look like a savior. He looked like a storm held in a suit. Jake stood up slowly, trying to regain his alpha posture, but his eyes were darting now. "Who the hell is that? Elena, why are you bringing strangers into my house?" "It's my house, Jake," I whispered. "And he's not just a stranger." Adrian stepped fully into the light. He didn't raise his voice, but the authority he carried was so thick you could almost taste it. "I believe you work at the downtown hotel, Jake," Adrian said, his voice a low, rhythmic rumble. "The Cole Hospitality flagship?" I saw the exact moment the blood left Jake's face. He recognized the name. Every employee in the city knew the face of Adrian Cole, the executive chairman. The man who owned the very ground Jake stood on at work. I, Jake stammered, the TV remote falling from his hand. "Earlier today," Adrian continued, stepping closer to me, "I was visiting the surgical unit for our foundation program. I saw a young woman being told she had no ride home. I saw a woman who could barely stand. And now I see why she was so afraid to come back here." Adrian's phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't even look at it, but Jake's phone buzzed at the exact same time. On the coffee table, a notification banner lit up the dark room. Internal alert. Employee status change. The room felt like it was tilting. For years, Jake had been the one with the power. For years, he was the one who made the rules. But as he stared at that phone, and then at Adrian, and finally at me, he realized that the world he built on my back was finally, violently, starting to collapse. And we were just getting started. The silence in the apartment didn't just feel empty. It felt heavy, like the air right before a massive oak tree cracks in a storm. Jake was staring at his phone, the blue light reflecting in eyes that were wide with a sudden, sharp terror. He had spent years building a kingdom out of my silence, and in 10 seconds, Adrian Cole had set it all on fire. "Suspended?" Jake whispered, his voice cracking. "Effective immediately? You can't do this. I've given 5 years to that hotel." "Actually," Adrian said, his voice as smooth and cold as a marble floor, "you've taken 5 years from it. We'll get to the vendor invoices later. Right now, I'm more interested in what you've taken from the woman standing next to me." Right then, the doorbell rang. It wasn't a soft, polite chime. It was a rhythmic, urgent demand. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Sarah had arrived. She stepped into the room like a soldier entering a breach. She had a paper bag of soup in one hand and a thick manila envelope in the other. She didn't look at the expensive suit Adrian was wearing, and she didn't look at the flat-screen TV Jake loved so much. She looked at me. She saw the hospital tape on my arm, the way I was leaning against the wall, and her eyes turned into flint. "You should be in bed," she said to me, her voice trembling with a focused, protective rage. "She should be in the kitchen," Jake muttered, a pathetic attempt to regain control through mockery. Sarah turned to him. The air seemed to hiss. "You really said that out loud? While she's literally bleeding under those clothes? You're even smaller than I thought. Jake." Sarah didn't wait for him to respond. She slammed the manila envelope onto the coffee table. Thud, the sound of a life being unpacked. "I've been waiting for this night," she said. She looked at Adrian, recognizing him now, but her mission was bigger than office politics. "I'm Elena's best friend, and for the last 6 months, I've been her forensic accountant, because the math in this house never added up." Jake lunged for the envelope, but Adrian moved half a step. He didn't touch Jake. He didn't have to. The mere presence of a man like Adrian was enough to make Jake recoil like a kicked dog. "Open it, Elena," Sarah said quietly. With trembling fingers, I pulled out the first sheet. It was a series of bank transfer screenshots. Highlighted in neon yellow were small, unsurgical withdrawals from my surgery recovery fund. $150 here, $200 there, always on the days Jake claimed the electric bill was late or the landlord was threatening eviction. He wasn't paying bills, Sarah said, pointing to a second sheet. Look at the routing numbers. 1 payment to an online sportsbook, 2 payments to a jewelry store for a watch Elena never saw, and a constant stream of cash to his personal savings. I looked at Jake. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. He was looking for an exit. But that's not the worst part, Sarah continued, her voice rising. Tell him about the credit, Elena. Tell him about the ghost from 4 years ago. My throat felt like it was filled with glass. You told me you needed a cosigner for a work certification, Jake. You said it would help us both get ahead. I was 18. I trusted you. I paid that off, Jake shouted. No, you didn't, I countered, my voice growing stronger with every word. You missed the first 5 payments. You tanked my credit score before I even knew what a credit score was. And then you told Mom and the rest of the family that I was the irresponsible one. You used me as a shield for your own failures. And the landlord emails, Sarah added, handing a printout to Adrian. Jake has been emailing the property office for months, claiming Elena is mentally unstable due to her health issues. He tried to have her name removed from the lease so he could claim the apartment as his own. I'm using her money to pay for it. Adrian took the paper. I watched his jaw flex. It was the only sign of emotion he'd shown, and it was terrifying. You tried to make her homeless while she was preparing for surgery? Jake did what he always did. He tried to play the family card. I'm your brother, Elena. We're blood. You're really going to let these people talk to me like this? After everything I've done for you? What have you done for me, Jake? I asked. The question hung in the air, cold and unanswered. You lived off my paycheck. You stole from my body's recovery. You tried to break my spirit so I'd never realize I was the one holding the roof over your head. You're not my family. You're a parasite. I reached into the entry table drawer. I pulled out the one document I had kept hidden, even from Sarah until 2 weeks ago. You thought you were getting my name off the lease? I threw the paper onto his lap. I signed the renewal 3 months ago, with my aunt's help. I'm the primary tenant. You're not even listed as an occupant anymore. You're a guest, Jake. A guest who has overstayed his welcome by 10 years. Adrian took out his phone. Building security? This is Adrian Cole. I need 2 guards in Unit 4B. We have an unauthorized individual who needs to be escorted off the premises. Yes, immediately. Jake's face went from pale to a sickly, mottled purple. He looked at the door, then at the envelope, then at the man who owned his career. He realized the walls weren't just closing in, they were gone. You're ruining my life over dinner? He hissed at me. No, I said, standing as tall as my stitches would allow. I'm reclaiming my life over the truth. Get your things, Jake, or the police can help you pack. The next 20 minutes were a blur of jerky movements. Jake shoving clothes into a duffel bag, muttering curses under his breath. The security guards standing like statues by the door. Adrian staying in the corner, a silent, powerful guardian. Sarah standing by my side, her hand on my shoulder, finally letting me lean on her. As Jake reached the door, he turned back. He looked at me with a hatred so pure it should have burned. You'll regret this. You'll be lonely in this big, empty place. I've been lonely for 10 years with you here, I said. Tonight I'm finally alone, and it feels wonderful. The door clicked shut. This time it wasn't the sound of a trap. It was the sound of a seal. Sarah exhaled a breath she'd been holding for a lifetime. She opened the soup, and Adrian walked over and handed me a business card. My legal team will call you tomorrow, Elena, he said softly. The financial theft and the lease fraud, we will handle it. You just focus on healing. Why? I asked. Why help me? Adrian looked at the apartment, then back at me. Because I've spent my life building structures for people to live in. I can't stand seeing someone try to burn one down from the inside. Later that night, after Sarah had tucked me into bed and the apartment was finally, blissfully quiet, I crawled to the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror. I was exhausted. I was in pain. My skin was sallow and my eyes were sunken. But for the first time in my life, the woman looking back at me didn't look like a victim. She didn't look like a helper or a background character. She looked like the author of her own story. The stitches would heal. The money could be earned back. But the silence? The silence was gone forever, and in its place was a voice that would never be quiet again.